muffles what you have to say. I don't have to hear a lot of loudness coming out of Michigan.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, we are live. We're going to begin our Board of Education work session. Randy, can you call roll, please?
Richard Lindsay,
Here.
Shauna Gamble,
Here.
Amanda Lankard,
Here.
Larry Williams,
Here.
Lisa Middleton,
Here.
Carrie Nicholson,
Here.
Bill DeSmet.
Here. Okay, we will observe our customary moment of silence. Okay. Lisa, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, may I entertain a motion for approval of the agenda, please?
Move for approval.
Support.
Richard, and then Lisa, was that you? Thank you. Any discussion? Start with Richard.
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Bill? Yes. Members of the audience may address the board on agenda items only. Seeing none, we will move on to board topics. Start with A, board policy update, second read, volume 34.2. Randy?
Yeah, so you have the list of the board policies on recommended revisions and so forth. Had a few questions that came from Amanda and tried to answer those for her. It's my recommendation that we review these in final review and bring them to action, which will be later on in the meeting.
So do you want, if there's any questions, bringing them up at this point, or?
Yeah,
Yep, okay.
if there's any outstanding questions right now at this point, other people had the opportunity to respond as well. Anything? Because I really don't know if we should go through every one of them unless you feel like I need to.
No, is everybody okay to not go through everyone? Okay.
Okay, we'll come back to that then.
Okay, we'll move on to B, update Calhoun County Health Department.
Yeah, so as a Rich, will we be able to run that video? Okay, let me do a lead in. Since this kind of falls under our community health and what we do with our work in the district, this idea came to us from a couple community members. Judge Line or Frank Line suggested it. Bill was part of that conversation. We liked the idea, so we pitched it to Ryan over at Bluefish, and the idea was to get some of our local physicians that are involved with our schools, and also our physicians that are like graduates and alumni of our Marshall High School, as well as a broad view of students that could step up and talk a little bit about the importance of masking up Marshall REDHAWKS. So with that, let's take a look at this.
I shall play it safe.
I shall set a good example.
I shall show I care.
I shall show respect for others.
I shall do so for my.
Here we go.
I shall play it safe.
I shall set a good example.
I shall show I care.
I shall show respect for others.
I shall do so for my neighbor.
I shall keep my family safe.
I shall keep my family safe.
I shall not make excuses.
I shall always take it with me.
I shall make a difference.
Stopping the spread of COVID in our community starts with you. What shall you do?
I shall wear it with pride.
Mask up, REDHAWKS.
Yay. What do you think? Little PSA that we can put out and post and try to get as broad a use as we can with it. I think it's pretty exciting to have that. We'll just keep on rolling that through at the schools and things like that, so kids get connected with that. I want to thank Dr. Nicholson for starring in that. Okay, so Calhoun County Health Department. In your board packet, let me get back to where we're at. In your board packet, there is a Department of Health and Human Services Emergency Order 2253. Let me see where that is at. And I sent you over around a one-pager. This is directive or guidance from DHHS, but it's also HHS, but it's also a result of legislative action that occurred with our legislators in Lansing. It requires us to report identified COVID case positives or probable case positives in our district, and it's for the purpose of reporting cases that are transmitted within the district, okay? Which is a little bit different than having what we've historically had since we started, people coming in, whether it's an adult or a student that have tested positive for COVID, but have had that experience outside of our district, and they're bringing it to our schools. When that happens, I give that report that someone's tested positive. I do that through letter form, and that goes out, and we do a database on that. When the health department determines that we have a case of positive, whose likely source of that exposure was another case of positive within our schools, that's the reporting that we have to put up publicly as a public alert, which is a COVID positive alert. That is to go on our front page of our website. It's got to be what we're going to call it as MPS COVID positive alert. And it stays on there with some information behind it about the building in which that was located, whether it was a staff or student. And that stays for 48 hours, and it comes down after 48 hours of an alert. Each time that happens, it's driven by the county health department telling us this is the case we have to report. It's not that we're not reporting all the other ones, because we are, and we're keeping that database. We need to report that back out to you. How many cases do we have? Those types of things. But this is the step-by-step that I gave you. It's titled Public Notice of School Associated Case of COVID-19. They call it School Associated Case. So just so you know what to expect, and we have to start that now as of today. Those cases that we were dealing with were Saturday and Sunday. They're in our database, and you have letters of record that go out to each of the buildings that may have a student impacted on that or a staff impacted on that, and it goes out to their families as well as on their Facebook page. None of those reach the criteria to be posting this as an alert on our website, okay? When that happens, you'll see that, and certainly it could happen tomorrow. So, you know, we have no way of anticipating that. We just need to make sure we're diligent in our contact tracing, the information we share with the health department, and the guidance we're getting back from the health department, okay? Another thing I wanted to bring up in regards to the health department, Eric Pressel shared with the superintendents what's called the interim guidance to local health departments and school districts for increasing or decreasing intensity of its in-person instruction in Michigan school districts. This is a personal document and guidance that he and other directors of the health departments function on across the state of Michigan. It's not mine to share, but it's something that he's afforded all of our school district superintendents, so we know what are some of the premises and some of the decisions that go in to when he has to call me and say, Dr. Davis, you really need to go back to remote in this circumstance or this circumstance. It's pretty involved. There's a lot of different data points, I guess, and scenarios or circumstances within the community and within our schools that he has to take into consideration. There are actually from low level all the way up to A, B, C, D, and E for those decisions to be made, and they're based on whether there's no cases in a school building, if there's buildings with known cases of 3 or more in staff and students, but no ongoing transmission, so it's just a cluster. It's not an outbreak, and then the other one would be an outbreak. If there's buildings with evidence of ongoing transmission, 3 or more cases within that situation, and the health department can track it back to a positive COVID case in that school building. Right now, as you've seen in the correspondence that I've given in our letters, and the work that we've done over the weekend, we put in well over 12, 14 hours of work on Saturday and Sunday to get this taken care of. And still we had a few open contact tracing issues that we had to address today. In particular, we weren't able to identify through interviews 4 athletes that were possibly close contact with one of our staff members. We were able to finally identify that this afternoon. So once we get all that information, they're all being communicated with and contacted either directly from Danielle Sievert, our school nurse, or directly by the health department. Right now, there are so many cases in Calhoun County that are considered close contacts that they've parceled out the responsibility of contacting some of the families on close contacts through another company up in Lansing who supports the county health departments in making those calls. So now it's like 24 hours to 72 hours before the health department officially gives you a letter and gives you a notice that you're a close contact and asking you to self-quarantine. We do that quicker. Simply because we get confirmation from the health department locally, and we can reach out to them and say, hey, heads up, you're considered a close contact, you should start quarantining. You'll be getting confirmation of that from the health department soon, okay? In this scenario that we had yesterday, I thought I'd take a moment to share with you. I actually was interviewed on Zoom with Channel 3 and Channel 8 today. That'll be on the 6 o'clock news and then the 11 o'clock news most likely. They were most interested in why we made the decisions we did and what the circumstances were. We had a staff member that tested positive and also had symptoms. And if you go back from the time they had symptoms, 48 hours behind that is where you start talking about contact tracing for contacts during an infectious period. And then that person had multiple responsibilities both at the middle school and the high school. And that's one of the reasons why the middle school and the high school were impacted by pausing in-person instruction for Monday and Tuesday as we completed that, because we didn't want students that may have had close contact coming back into the school in person possibly without us knowing that, and until we completed our contact tracing. Health department was behind us all the way on that. They were really pleased that we did that. And at the same time, the close contacts that this individual had at the middle school with colleagues actually put a huge dent in our ability to perform in-person instruction in a number of different genres or a number of different subject areas. We also have one of our current administrators at the middle school that is out on quarantine because of an external case. So for all of that, it was important for us to take a moment, take a pause, know that we can go back in person on Thursday if everything's cleared up, and we'll clearly identify who's on quarantine, how long that quarantine is going to last, and then we're also combining our resources between middle school and high school to talk about how we can offer overall support so we don't have any holes in our instruction at the middle school when we come back to in-person on Thursday. The other case was a case of a staff member that tested positive and had symptoms over at Harrington Elementary. Neither one of those cases are associated with each other. That person, by our contact tracing, we were able to identify 6, we had 7 other staff members that were considered close contacts. After doing interviews and following up on each one of them was no longer considered a close contact. So we had 5, including the teacher makes, or the staff member makes 6, are now all out on quarantine. On top of that, there are 2 classrooms, the 2 kindergarten classrooms impacted, and a number of other students that are served by that particular staff member. All of them have been contacted and indicated that they should stay for I believe it's going to be a 14-day quarantine. It might be earlier than that, depending on the timing of when this person had symptoms. We are going to continue in remote learning for Harrington Elementary tomorrow all the way through the 23rd of October. And then we will revisit in the week of the 23rd to determine if we are ready to go back to in-person. That case, there's a couple of other folks that may be presenting symptoms as far as adults are concerned. We're watching that carefully with the health department because we want to find out, is this, and what the health department said is, because you may have other adults identified that come up COVID positive does not mean you have an outbreak until we determine that based on source. So they go back through and really do, okay, who do you have in common? What experiences did you have in common in the building? Do you have common time and place and association with a COVID positive individual while they were in the building? And did you have any opportunity outside or with other people in that building to pick that up from somebody else? Those are the conversations we have. And if you can imagine, we're all wearing masks, we're all practicing social distancing in the classrooms and the hallways and so forth. There are a couple times where kids may get tired of it, but we are addressing those issues. It's not a rampant issue. Our protocols are strong, as evidenced by the fact that we've had at least 6 to 8 more individuals, either students or staff, that came into our buildings COVID positive, and we were able to contain and not have a spread within the buildings. So that's indicative of how strong most schools are in regards to practicing social protocol or safety protocol. If we have an incident of an outbreak, it's going to be because we didn't follow the safety protocols, most likely, because that's what we're going to lead to. We're mask used at all times. Were you less than 6 feet for a culmination of 15 minutes during the time that you were infectious? So that includes like a Monday and Tuesday. If you're working and you were infectious, it's a combination of 15 minutes in total during that time. Were you washing hands? Were you making sure kids were washing hands? Were you wiping down surfaces? All those type of things. So that's the work that we've been doing. It was pretty busy yesterday. We did 9 hours worth of work before we closed it off at around 10:30 and came back at it early this morning. I'm pretty pleased with the response from the district. I know the health department is, and they're still working with us because each time I get a call from the health department, it's one more situation that came up. Somebody else got presented as COVID positive from their family or from whatever, and they're coming into the district, and we have to contact trace behind that. I'm glad that we actually have the system in place that we do, and I'm glad that we're continuing to work diligently to make sure we're not doing spread inside our buildings. If you have any questions, let me know in regards to that.
So, Dr. Davis, it seems like we're really compromising our ability to...
Can you speak in that?
Yeah, it seems like we're really compromising our ability to educate if one person can take down 5 staff members. Are we talking to them about socially distancing while they're at work so that they're not, if we would be in a different situation, I'm assuming, at Harrington, if the staff members were not as close to each other and
Yes.
didn't.
Yeah, to answer your question, yes. And you are absolutely correct. This individual had multiple responsibilities throughout the week because Robert was out. The nature of what was going on required them to be in the classroom, and they were able to identify and verified by the individuals identified as being close contacts. It's not because they had their masks off, it was because they were having a 20-minute dialogue about curriculum or about this or about that, and we're obviously felt like, we felt, and so did the health department, that that was close enough contact to put them on quarantine.
Okay.
But we are talking to our staff all the time and talking to our administrators that you do not spend that kind of time within 6 feet of someone. It's okay to have incidental contact along the way, as long as you're practicing your safety practices of washing hands, et cetera. But to be in a long period of time with someone, that's really not something we're encouraging at all or want to see happen, including even lunchtime periods.
And are we still doing things like cracking windows open for ventilation?
We're supposed to be doing that, yeah. I mean, that would be something you'd have to ask each of the building principals if that's practice, or I can do the same thing.
Okay. And then it's good to hear about the specific case, but the other thing is just the thoughts on our overall numbers in Calhoun County and Michigan, because when you look at those and think back to our discussion in August about when we were considered safe to stay open, it doesn't seem like the numbers reflect that. So can you give us an idea of why they think that we should still be open at this point with where our numbers are?
Yes, it's still considered a surge. It's not considered a social a community spread.
And what's the difference
I
between a
really,
surge or?
they have a definition on the website, so you can look up on My Start Map and ask for the surge, and it's like 4-day or 3-day period of time with 10% increases in both of those metrics. What we're hearing now, I mean, even today during our superintendent's conversation, the county health department is supporting another district going to in-person in a week, even with the increase or surge that we're talking about. What we know from this document that I told you was shared with us internally, that while those markers I mentioned earlier are still true, those are the yellow caution, when we start getting up in that area of 40 per million of cases or over 4% on weekly average, 7-day average. When they get into the point where they have to make changes structurally or recommendations of pausing in person or closing down and going back to remote, they're actually looking at 14-day averages, and they're looking at a higher, much higher level that they would consider a crisis. That's something that the health department makes that decision on. It's not something I do. I'm not that kind of doctor. You are, but I'm not. And I have to make sure that I have to abide by their guidance, and I'm not going to second guess where they're at with those benchmarks. These are benchmarks adopted across the state in each county by this document that says these are the things where we would have to step in and say to a school district, yes, you have to pause your in-person. How long? Well, it's got to be for 14 days, or you need to shut down for 30 days and calm it down. It's just the same scenario when I have absences due to flu or illness in one particular building of 20% or starting to climb and the trend's going up. I have to start investigating, is it truly illness? And once we know it's truly illness, I'm having conversation with the health department, and once we get above that 25%, I'm going to be recommended or guided by the health department to close the building. So it's those kind of benchmarks that they look at and make advice to, and I'm gonna follow their guidance all the way through the board. So some of the things we may say, wasn't that kind of high? Weren't we at 178 per million just 2 weeks ago? And in Calhoun County, isn't that like a crisis or large? Well, 14-day average, is that the case, or is it just a spike that we saw in a particular time? So that's what they look at. It's over time and it's trending.
And then some districts are stratifying based on age, that at a certain rate, then we stop in person, like high school and middle school, and at a different rate, elementary school. Is there, some difference with that? Because I think it's a lot harder for the elementary school kids to learn at home. It's a lot more of a burden on their parents, and they're not, you look at the schools with the outbreaks, and they're not, quite at that same level of burden with the disease and spread. Is that something too that the health department looks at, or that we look at?
I do not look at that, and the health department does not look at that. We just basically look at the indicators that we're basing these decisions off of. Does anybody have any other questions about the county health department?
Yeah, Randy, could you just clarify again that the number of positive cases that we had over the weekend versus the number of people that were suggested to stay home and self-quarantine? 'Cause
Sure.
I know I had one person today, ask me like, do we have 6 teachers that are all positive? And I'm like, no, it's just through the contact tracing, correct? We've identified people that could be potentially infected from being near someone. Could you just clarify that
Sure.
for the record?
So we had one teacher that came up positive for COVID and symptoms. And based on that, we had 2 colleagues at the Marshall Middle School that were identified as close contacts. We were looking at another external coach that was considered a close contact, but not an employee of the district. At the Marshall High School, there were no staff members identified at that point. At the Marshall or Harrington Elementary, we have one person that was positive COVID tested and symptoms. And we had, hold on a second, I'm looking for the document. And we had 6 other staff members were determined to be close contacts. Close contacts did not mean COVID positive. So they're asked to quarantine, watch their symptoms. If they get tested, they're still quarantined because symptoms can come at any time, up to that period of time of up to 10 days, 8 to 10 days. So people that may get quarantined say, I'm going to go out and get tested, and they come back and say I'm negative, which has happened twice in our past so far, and that doesn't mean their quarantine stops. It means that's great to know, but you need to continue to be quarantined.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Amanda?
So I appreciated Carrie's questions about the cases, because I know I'm hearing in the community where we have all of these letters that are going out to parents and students about positive cases and quarantined staff members. And I know in August we had talked about the 4% and the 40 cases per million, and we have far exceeded that. And I know that this is a very fluid situation, and we're learning more, and things are changing, it seems, hourly. But at what point are we going to say, okay, health department, we are very concerned for the health of our students and our staff, and we need to either do something differently, or we need to pause some things in order to make sure that everybody is safe in our district. I feel like, once we reach whatever this other threshold is, then somebody's going to come out and say, well, maybe we need to choose another threshold. And maybe that's not the case, but sports are continuing to happen. All of these things are continuing to happen, and our cases continue to increase. So I feel like we have a responsibility to maybe put a little pressure where pressure needs to be put to make sure that we have the right practices, protocols. Like, something's eventually, there's going to be a point where enough is enough and we're going to have to put a pause on things because I don't foresee that things are going to change anytime soon. So it's concerning. I keep on hearing questions from parents. You know, everybody said 4%. We've surpassed 4%, 40 cases per million. We've far exceeded 40 cases per million. And maybe the health department can shed some light on why that has changed.
So I appreciate your comments, and I think I need to say a few things. Number one is the Calhoun County area continues to have surge. They continue to have upticks, but they also have decreases. So if you look at the dailies that are coming up on my start map, you'll see the up and downs and the spikes and those kind of things. They are continually looking at this from the health department's perspective, and so is every county in the state. When you say that we're sending all these letters out and so forth, that's a good thing.
Yes,
It's a good thing that we're
absolutely.
communicating out to our families and our staff, and they're fully aware of what we're aware of.
I agree.
When you say that at some point we have to say that we have care and concern for our students and we're going to make a decision and push the health department, we have care and concern for our students. We have committed to working together collectively across all districts in Branch, Berry, and Calhoun County with our health department to make sure that we're supporting their matrix, their process, their skills and expertise about their recommendations. If we as a district, if you as a board, when we do our review of our extended plan, if you as a board have a unanimous decision that it's enough, we're not going to do in person anymore, you have a right to say that. We're going to be able to hear that and hear that from our constituents and whether, you know, we should be looking at something different, and we'll continually keep our ears open for those things. I just think it's really important that we don't give up the commitments that we've made, because that's the foundation piece that I didn't make these things up. I don't know them inside and out. I'm trying to learn as much as I can and reading all the time. I will not advise, based on what my knowledge, what I sense my knowledge is about this. I'm going to wait for the health department to advise me about these things. And if I say, you know, this doesn't feel right, feels like we're going down a path that I don't think we're going to get out of, I can bring that back to the board, and we can talk about that on review of the extended plan, or you could bring that to the board in that discussion when we review it. Hopefully we'll have audience members that'll come in and say the same thing, and we'll do some surveying and make sure that we know. If you remember when I talked about the 40 and the 4%, I said I was reluctant to share that publicly because people will take that as gospel. And I said, these are only benchmarks for caution. They're not decision-making to be able to close down what we say we're going to do. At the same time, I could share some of these bullet points that come out of the health department, but again, we would be second-guessing what the health department is looking at all the different things. For example, we right now, I believe in the county, have somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 patients hospitalized in our emergency rooms or our hospitals in Calhoun County. At our peak, up to this point, we only had 4. So that's one of those things that you look at and go, wow, what does that mean? What age group is that? You know, they do all this unpacking of that data. So I'm not gonna second guess them. I'm gonna follow their lead. But if you as a board decide that it's time to give up the ghost in regards to in-person instruction, you have every right to bring it up for discussion. I could bring it up. I have the authority to make that decision now in any one of our buildings, but I have to have good, sound rationale and evidence behind it, or that 70% of folks that want to have in person are going to have issues. So we have to make sure we're balancing care and concern and safety and protocols. And if we figure that we're not doing a good job with that, that's another reason why I would bring it back to the board. If we feel like it's impossible for us to do these continuing protocols about social distancing and so forth. In phase 5, some of these restrictions get loosened. And when they get loosened, what are we going to do? Well, we took the high road and the stricter road that actually became the executive order before the Supreme Court came in that said all kids are going to wear K-12 masks throughout the day. We, before they did that, said that up front because our teachers said, I would feel more comfortable in the teaching environment if you would make that a requirement for all kids. So there are times where you can sit together and go, doesn't feel good. Let's do something different about it. But that's why we're doing this review of the extended plan every month to sign off with consensus that we can move forward with what we have planned.
Thank you. So on this notice that you sent to us with the 48-hour notice, this is if we have spread within our buildings,
Yes,
correct?
transmission within one of our buildings.
Are we also going to continue to send out the letters that we're sending
Yes.
out? Right. Okay,
We're going to identify every positive COVID case.
great. And then it might be, since we're coming up on the first marking period, it might be a good opportunity to possibly send another survey out to our parents to ask, how are things going? How could we support you? I saw that that we're working with ALBION College to offer free tutoring for students, which is great. I am really excited about that, but it might be an opportunity to touch base with parents to say, how could we help you? How could we support you? Is there anything else that we could be doing? What's working well? What's not working well?
Yes, we have those surveys already formatted. We just have to put out another one
Perfect.
sometime. Yep.
There you go, one step ahead.
Yep.
Randy, I just had one more question. I know that it was a long weekend for everyone involved in the contact tracing and getting information out to families in order to plan for today and tomorrow and for the week. And I know that you had mentioned that the robocall was attempted and there was a glitch. Did we ever find out what happened or
Yes.
in order to fix that for next time?
Yes, actually, our colleagues in the audience could probably answer this, but basically there are, what am I trying to think? There's a setup in the robocall that allows people to be able to use it as a user or use it as a higher authority developer of the messaging. And because Kimberly was unavailable, Becky was unavailable, and we needed some help in putting those robocalls out, we asked Dave Turner to do that, and he didn't have the higher level authority. So it wasn't, and then Taryn was called in at like 10 o'clock at night, 9:30 at night, to come in and make sure that that opened up so that we were able to give him the authorities to be able to release those robocalls. That's why we had a glitch in the system. We thought for sure he'd be able to do that early on, and we were as anxious as everybody else was to get that message out.
Well, I appreciate the efforts by going through email and Facebook and other mediums to get that out when that wasn't working. Thank you.
So Dr. Davis, I think just one of the things with making these decisions is I feel like if we don't have information, then it's hard to know if we're making valid judgments on whether, this is good to proceed or not, as well as when people ask us, well, why are you still open, or why are you doing this or that, and we don't have any of the information, then it's hard to give them something that's reassuring to know that we are making the right judgments, because it does seem like it's a lot higher, and I understand the surge or if there's little outbreaks, but on the other side of it too, there's still the question, are kids safer in school than the environment they would be in if they aren't in school? Because in school we're social distancing, we're wearing their masks. If they're at home and they don't have anybody to watch them, are they going to have a bunch of people at their neighbors that aren't masking and aren't social distancing? And I don't feel like we've gotten that information, or if anybody's really looked across, the state to see, where we're at with that. And I know there are a lot of families that are struggling with the hybrid model and the remote model and learning from home. And so there are a lot of issues with closing down as well, and we might find that that's a detriment even if our numbers are high. But if we know what information we're basing that on, and so we can be more confident in saying that, yes, this is what we should be doing. And I think that's just what I'm looking for to say, is this the right decision? Not necessarily that the health department isn't making the right decision or that we shouldn't be following it, but just why is it, and are there anything different we should be doing? And so to me, it's reassuring that we haven't had spread, but, you know, we may eventually get to that point if we have enough people coming in with it.
I agree. I don't have enough data, I think, or background experience to give that to you, Carrie. I do know that all the web, well, for the MyStart map is a critical thing that I look at every day. I know that every day, every employee, including myself, log in and do a health screener. Some of those have been helpful when we've talked about contact tracing, because we've been able to go back to an individual and go, you mentioned that you had 2 symptoms that you were worried about. It wasn't one that would keep you home based on that level, but you had that on Tuesday of last week. Did you have any further symptoms? And those conversations have been really helpful. I can't give all that information out all the time, but I understand your concern that, do we have faith in the decisions that are being made and the protocols that we're basing that on, the data we're basing that on? And from my practice, I say I've never been through a pandemic before, and I think it's the best system that we have going right now as far as our responsiveness to it. Will there be a time where we're going to find out that you know, something got compromised? Yeah. I mean, we're concerned about students leaving our buildings with their mask on, and then they take their mask off in the parking lot and they're hanging around with each other and getting in a car and driving together. We're concerned about staff members, you know, just kind of finally relaxing after the kids are gone in the building and just taking the mask off and chatting because they think they're safe, because we're all in there and we're all working and we're allegedly COVID free, but we could be asymptomatic. You know, so I mean, there are things that we have to always be diligent about, and I sent out an email the other day about the 3 C's to our staff because of the surge that's going on in Marshall, because of all the social things that have occurred. And during those social events in the community, we've had direct links back to those events for COVID positive. And I said, you know, in closed indoor environments with crowded people where social distancing cannot be maintained, you've got the highest risk possible of being able to pick up COVID positive in those circumstances. Stay away from them. Stay away from the weddings. Stay away from the receptions. Stay away from the funerals with lots of people. Even if you're practicing your mask and social distancing, you have the risk if you get too close for too long. So, I mean, people have to take it seriously. At the same time, we have folks out in that community that refuse to follow along those guidelines. The Department of Health and Human Services, they've come out with their order, their emergency order that mirrors exactly what Governor Whitmer said in her last executive order. And they have the teeth behind it. It's a misdemeanor if you don't follow it. You could be fined up to, I think, $200 now, and you could have some time in jail. But it's a misdemeanor. Are our police departments going to be enforcing those misdemeanors when they walk down when they go down the road and find out that here's a group of people over here with no mask on and they're congregating with less than 5 feet? Are they going to come into our football stadium and identify those people that are in the audience that are required to wear a mask to come in, have their mask off, or don't have a mask at all? And who's going to call that? Who's going to make that judgment along the way? So it's hard to enforce these things, and people just have to start believing more and more that this is critically important for ourselves and for those we love and those people that we come in contact with. And I don't know what else to say about it other than we are working really hard within our buildings to make sure that that's maintained.
Any other questions?
So I do have a question. So I'm wondering about if it's possible to, since the health department is reaching out to schools regularly, if it's possible to have them write something up that says, you know, we discussed this, you know, 40 per million, 4% thing. this is where that came from. I mean, we have some information on where they came up with that initially. But it might be helpful for them to just say, this is why we haven't made an overall determination to say shut everything down. Because it would help us, not just us, but it would help, districts make that make sense. And it would also help, families understand this was a guide, and this is why we haven't, unilaterally said all schools in Calhoun County need to shut down. That would be really helpful. And I'm sure for them, it's pretty simple for them because they know what those numbers mean and they know
Right.
what that analysis is for them. So that might be helpful.
I think I'll bring that suggestion to the Calhoun County Health Department. We have that verbiage that goes on every week at 11 o'clock in a Zoom meeting. We don't take minutes of those where it comes back out and we share the minutes, but Eric could, and his spokesperson at the health department could probably put something together as a newsletter. They might even have something like that. I haven't looked online. Have you guys looked online at the county health department and see if they do anything like that?
I was looking and I don't see anything specifically. no.
Okay, Sean, Sean, I'll give that suggestion.
I think I just know what they put out through the Joint Operations Center, which doesn't necessarily indicate what you're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, good.
I have one more question. I know, I think a few weeks ago, an email was sent out regarding high tech and their cleaning procedures in our school. As we have more probable or possible positive COVID cases, I just want to make sure that they are indeed doing those extra touches, the extra cleaning. I know there were some issues at Hughes regarding a lack of janitorial staff or a lack of availability. Is everything good with high tech? Are we 100% fully functioning?
100% fully fine. So staffing issues come up with any organization, and they had some staffing issue blips that were going on, and that's part of the reason why there was some missed opportunities in the building. That's changed. It's changed with reassignment of staff we already have, as opposed to bringing, while they're posting it and trying to get the position filled. So people are working extra to do the complete job that we expect. Case in point, the Clorox 360 was utilized this morning early on at Harrington for the whole entire building to make sure that that got a full disinfecting. Across the board, it got aired out for the day. Things are looking really good. They're going back through and doing surface cleaning and all those types of things. We've talked with the management. We've talked with the local supervisors here in the district, and we're all on the same page. We've looked at cameras to make sure that the crews have come into those buildings to do what they're supposed to do on Wednesday afternoons and evenings, and also that approach on Fridays. So as good as I can say we're doing, there's always room for improvement, and hopefully they'll have a full staff. I don't think right now, I think they're doing fine, but I think anytime we do this over a long period of time, it stretches everybody. I would like to see them make sure that they have a full contingent. So that's something that Becky and I are talking with them about.
Okay.
They're a good crew, and they're working hard, and we have some really wonderful workers out of that group.
Anything else? Okay. Let's move on to C, resumption of Albion City Rec Services.
Right, so I believe, do you guys have a copy of the 2020-175 executive order from Governor Whitmer in your board packet?
I believe it's under 4D.
It should be safeguards to protect Michigan's workers for COVID-19. 175.
It is in, I think
Yes.
it's listed
Yes,
in
we do.
number 4.
Okay. So talking with our legal team, Truan Law Firm, and talking to the county health department. Those are two things we want to do. We want to talk to our legal advisors, and we want to talk to the county health department. Based on 22175, we have the authority to move towards opening ourselves up in the community center. Again, I would suggest that you go to item 13 under sports and exercise facilities. Can't tell you the page, I'm sorry.
13, you said?
Item 13 and item 14. This is a list of guidelines. Under 13, it's A to N, and under 14, it's A, B, and C. This is a list of guidelines on what we have to adhere to open our community center up at the from Albion Rec Department over at the Opportunity High School. I had a meeting with the city manager, acting city manager at Albion, along with the director of our city rec department, who happens to sit on this board. And we reviewed this list. They've agreed that they can abide by this list, including the time that, the percentage of people we have on the pool deck when we have senior swim or aerobics or whatever. And they're going to do a sign-in sheet because we have to be accountable for all students that are young people that access that center, as well as adults, in case we have to do contact tracing. We're responsible for all the facilities maintenance of that, but the city rec department's responsible for oversight and accountability. And so with that, we've agreed. There is one more year left in the millage right now for the rec department millage in Albion. We've agreed to extend the contract for one more year to wrap up this agreement with the county rec department, and then either renegotiate or determine what our next steps need to be. We're very excited about having them back and the potential of bringing some resources back to our kids. Our after-school programmings are critical. We don't have the wherewithal, the personnel to provide that in any consistent manner, and the rec department has been an excellent partner for us in the last number of years for this. So we've been given approval to go forward. The health department's done the same thing for us. So we have an existing contract that ends in 2021? 2021. And then we'll renew for one more year. Blessings by the city manager, acting city manager. So we'll get back to business. There are a number of folks that want to use our facility. The YMCA from Battle Creek is interested in using our facility. They've already done outdoor aerobics and yoga, I believe, in the parking lot for adults. They want to be able to come back inside, play right with Milt Barnes with his basketball program, want to come back inside instead of playing basketball under the pavilion at Victory Park, because the elements now require us to have indoor stuff. So this is an opportunity for us to do that. And as long as we abide by these guidelines, we're going to be fine.
Any questions? 13 was on page 35 in our packet as well.
So in the event that we have to close or take a pause, would that also transfer to the Opportunity High School and the Albion City Rec Department as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
They have to abide by our scheduling and our rules on that. That ultimately is our facility.
Okay. And then if we resume services with Albion City Rec, would that also allow the opportunity for outside sports organizations, the use of our gymnasiums, like the basketball programs, or Marshall City Rec, to use our facilities as well?
Yes, on a case-by-case basis, we'll review each one of those. Because we have an existing contract or user agreement with the City Rec Department in Albion, is the reason why it's easy for us to open this up first. And I think I'd feel more comfortable if we were out of phase 4 into phase 5 for that, but we'll take a look at each of those circumstances that might come up.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Let's move on to D, State Supreme Court ruling on the governor's executive orders.
So I just wanted to illustrate to you, I gave you a copy under 4D. High Court strikes down Whitmer's emergency powers. Governor vows to use other means. I thought that was a really good headline for actually what transpired. If you notice, there were actually 2 executive orders that fell between when she thought that this should take effect or when not. But she immediately had the Department of Health and Human Services take over their experience with emergency orders based on public health, which is completely authorized and within their authority and also within their realm of what purpose the Department of Health and Human Services provides. So along with this Supreme Court order, which, I mean, I don't want to just write it off as politics because it's significant. We have to look at how that got brought in front of the state Supreme Court, why that decision was made. That created a lot of confusion for public schools across the state of Michigan. We had to go back to look at executive orders that were in place or not in place, et cetera, and the most important ones have to do with our ability to do safety protocols in our buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So the first one that came out, which was most important, is the emergency order under Department of Health and Human Services 2253, gathering prohibitions and mask order. So they came back and reinforced pretty much everything that the governor did in her executive order, that masks are required to be worn outside and inside, that our schools are abiding by that through our protocols, that social distancing is required 6 foot. Another issue is the gathering numbers, which gives us lead to why we have the building set up the way we do. We're allowed to have 20% of our assigned seating available for capacity. It's roughly around 79 seats in this auditorium that we could make available down on the general floor. I didn't count the balcony. So we're only talking about the lower floor. The lower floor in the high school is a lot larger, and we can have over 150. So you notice that they're spaced far enough apart for social distancing. They're assigned a seat where those papers are located. We have it set up so that we could always bring back a row by row by row. If more people show up and are able to do that, we can manage that in any capacity as long as we don't go over 70, I think it's like 76 or something like that here. We've rarely had that kind of number of people that shown up in board meetings, but there's a possibility that we could. So we're looking at all of our venues. I've asked and received what our seating capacity is on the first floor in each of our auditoriums at the Opportunity High School, the high school, and the middle school. I've asked them to give us the square footage of each of our learning resource centers at the high school, the middle school, and the Opportunity High School, because you have to use 20% of the fire marshal's recommendation based on square footage. So we know what our seating capacity would be in each of those facilities as well, as long as we maintain the safety protocols. So I'm pleased to see this. Quite frankly, one could argue this is probably the venue in which these things should have come out to begin with, because this is their job, and they have the authority, full authority, including legal authority, to exact misdemeanor violations of those people that don't follow the rules and regulations. So I wanted to make sure that you saw that. It is confusing to dig too much into the Supreme Court ruling. I know that's going to be argued back and forth for some time, but the bottom line is, and I'm going to believe this in our legislature and our courts, is that this is an opportunity for the governor to work more closely with our legislature and those people that make decisions about this, like the Department of Health and Human Services, to get consensus and to lead the state forward in these kind of responses to our public health concerns. So I wanted to make sure that you guys had that in front of you.
Any questions on any of that? Okay, thank you. Move on to E, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yeah, so who sent the MCRC? Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. I smiled when you did it because I just received it myself and I read it and it was like, okay.
Yes, your name was in there.
Well, our name for Marshall and Albion and some of the data and so forth is in there, and there's a number of points that we've been able to make through that process. I'm very pleased about the report. I think it not only shows us in the conclusions the recommendations that the Civil Rights Commission does have after looking at education across the state, but those recommendations are broad, very broad sometimes, where we're talking about housing in economically distressed regions, et cetera, and those are a lot of common things you see us working on as a district and in collaboration with our partners around Marshall and Albion. But we can do more. We can clearly do more. I would really encourage you to take a look at those recommendations and think about how we can put that type of thing into action. Who do we need to talk to? What circles do we need to be in, like the Economic Development Group in Albion with their housing subcommittee, or what we're doing with career and technical education, all of these different things. We need to do more in regards to equity and inclusion. So I was pleased with this. You'll see the email that I sent out imploring the Civil Rights Commission to work with me and work with MASA, the Michigan Association of School Administrators, as well as thought leaders across the state to try to really work hard on identifying clear historical mile markers or milestones for different cultures to be embedded in our curriculum so that we can then hold everyone accountable to learning about each other's cultures, being taught about it, dialoguing about it, critically thinking about it in context of the culture itself, and then also being tested on it so it's part of my record to know if I got a B in that course or not. I want to make sure that we're embedding that in our curriculum because long after you guys are gone with me and we're not at this table, curriculum lasts. If you think about how difficult it is to change curriculum at the state level, curriculum lasts a lot longer than leaders do. And I really think our effort needs to be put in that vein. I'm going to spend my time in a lot of ways in trying to continue to have this dialogue with folks. I've started with Region 7 at MASA. I'm going up to the state to talk to Dr. Tina Kerr at MASA. I'd like to have Michigan Department of Education involved. There are things out there already. Shauna was able to identify some things she's got, and she'll be throwing those resources at me. But the difference between looking at what might be out there that a school might be adopting and actually requiring all school districts across the state to practice is a big, big difference. And I'd like to see us at least adopt it from our district perspective with a lot of good research and background and rationale, and then work on trying to make this a requirement for all community schools or public schools. If we ever hope to get to a truly inclusive environment, we need to start with that. And then we can work through how people are working with each other, engaging with each other, and developing relationships. But I really appreciate, Amanda, you giving that to us. I sent it out to you guys electronically again, in case you missed it. Please look at it. We need to demonstrate our intentionality behind this and our integrity behind this effort. And we have to put things into action as I've been called to do. And I think we need to move this agenda forward as a board.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions necessarily. Well, I might have a question in here. So I'm super excited that this is on the agenda. I'm glad that we were a part of the plan creation with the Civil Rights Commission. And this is actually a apropos topic when we are looking at the federal holiday, which we are on right now, of Columbus Day, or
Indigenous people.
as most communities and people are looking at this as Indigenous Peoples Day. So I think we have a ways to go. And I would be in favor, we don't have any kind of a task force or a subcommittee, do we, that?
No, we don't, and we've kicked around some ideas, so I'm going to go back and take a look at planning. There's a school equity plan that's called for out of the recommendations from the Civil Rights Commission. If you remember, you might not know this, Amanda, but 2 years ago we used their matrix to determine where we're at on the line of non-inclusive to inclusive schools. And I had feedback originally given, I think, as late as last year from our leadership team on where they saw our district at. It created a lot of really good conversation. Action-wise, there are things that we put into action, but probably not enough to really be diligent behind it. So I want to continue to do that work. And I think if we have a school equity plan in place and start developing that with feedback from different stakeholders and so forth, I think we'll get something moving forward. But there's going to have to be some significant change or significant adoption of practices and or leadership that is going to be able to help us move that forward, and there will be some cost to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am all in favor. Sign me up. I'd be happy to volunteer, and I'd be happy to help get some outside funding to fund some of the activities that will be required in order for the public, community input and plan development and hiring of consultants to do that for our district. And I think if we form a committee, we can ask for parents and teachers and staff and board members, community leaders to help move that forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this as well, and I guess one of my questions would be, how quickly can we have some kind of a plan with some definable objectives and a timeline? I mean, we talked. I agree with everything you said, and it looks like a really big thing to bite off, and we have to start with step one and then step two. Is that something you can provide to us? And I don't even know what the time frame is, so I'm not going to say a time frame, but an appropriate time frame.
Yeah, I'd say within the next 2 months before we get into or out of December, we should probably be able to have some guidance for you as an organization to the board for you guys to look at and say that's moving in the right direction, or there's something more you need from us. So I have to think about who needs to be at the table. I always like to think about who's missing at the table that needs to be there for dialogue. Any of you are more than welcome to be at the table to volunteer your time to work on that. But we need to make that move. And while I'm looking at my involvement with MASA and the Civil Rights Commission, I'll find resources that are out there as well. But all of you, if you have resources behind some of this discussion and how we can move this forward, we need to do more intentional work than what we've done before. So Glasswing was nice, had its place. National Equity Project had its place a number of years that we used them as our partners. But we need to find a way to be able to get some leadership and counsel that's going to move this conversation beyond those issues and really take a look at how do we change organizationally or institutionally in Marshall Public Schools to be more pluralistic, more culturally aware, more culturally inclusive, and demonstrate that from what we find is important to teach.
Any other questions, comments?
So I think I have a question and a comment. So, comment. I'm excited to see that we are talking about doing something by December. I like the fact that we have a date. One of the things that I think I can do pretty quickly is bring back to the board, well, just like send out an email from Dr. Johnson from Albion College, he showed us what he called the blueprint to belonging. One of the things that I think was would be beneficial for us for that, with using that, or even just looking at it, is that it kind of helps us decide what we need as an organization versus just saying, you know, here's a broad topic of stuff, we're going to do this, and that makes it work. So it helps us determine like what it is that we need as an organization, where we may be lacking, where we might have holes. So it makes it specific to us, which is awesome. And obviously, you know, if we have additions for the state, we would gladly provide that information for you too, Dr. Davis. And maybe I don't have a question. I just had a comment. That was all.
Thank you.
I've had just a thought about this for a long time. There has to be somebody, some school district somewhere in the United States that's doing this really well. I mean, is there a standard? I mean, you're really talking about doing something that's not really being done in school in Michigan right now. Who's doing this perfect? And I don't expect you to answer the question, but there's got to be somebody that's the standard for for this. I mean, with all the discussion that's going on about this right now, so I would be interested. Maybe I can Google it, Sean, and find it.
Well, I was just thinking about, you know, whoever's watching, if you know, send us an email, you know, because obviously this is something that all of us have to do together. So
I think in the plan, the civil rights plan, there were some districts that were named in there that they had an equity plan. I don't know, you know, doing it right is a matter of opinion. But there were some samples in there, and I know Lakeview School District has done some equity work over the years. I don't know if it's a comprehensive plan. I don't know if it's parts and pieces. But I know their leadership has changed over there with their superintendent, and I think most of that work was done under the previous superintendent. I'm not sure where it's at now.
Well,
but we definitely have resources in the community with the Kellogg Foundation. Definitely have resources.
That's what I thought. I think we have incredible resources to tap into. So.
Mm-hmm.
We'll certainly research that, and Richard, to try to find out if we have any districts that are doing exceptional work in that area in Michigan, and also in other areas that we can reach out to, because it is being done. I guess that one extra piece is it being required of all districts to do that? So first is find the framework that really works and makes sense, and explore multiple frameworks about that, and then really determining, are we going to move forward with that, and can we then lead a continuing dialogue of thought leaders in Michigan to try to get this to be a requirement across the board?
Well, and I think that what works well in one district may not work well in another district. So we have to take that into consideration and mold it so that it works for us, because there's a lot of contextual pieces and cultural pieces that come into play. So I'm a big believer of best practices and models, and then taking that and weaving that into what makes sense for us.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, action item board policy. Policy revisions and updates, volume 34.1 and volume 33.2. Can you give us a background, Randy?
Sure. At the September 28, 2020 business session, the board discussed recommendations received from Neola for updates to specific board policies in volumes 34.2. These policies are being presented tonight for board adoption. These policies have been available for public view in the superintendent's office since September 28, 2020. It is a recommendation of the superintendent that action item policy be approved as presented.
May I entertain a motion, please?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Richard.
Support.
Thank you, Shauna. Any discussion? Okay. We will start with Shauna.
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Bill? Yes. Richard?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to 6A, action items, board business, change the location of the work and business sessions of the Marshall Board of Education, November 2020 through January 2021. Randy, can you give us a background, please?
Yes, at the September 2020 business session, the board discussed changing the location of its sessions to allow constituents more opportunities to attend its sessions. The current schedule has the board meeting quarterly in Albion. The recommended schedule is to rotate the location of the sessions every other month as follows. October 26th, the business session would be in Albion. November 9th, combined work business session would be in Marshall. December 14th, combined work business session would be in Albion. January 11th, annual organizational meeting and work session would be in Marshall. January 25th, the business session would be in Marshall. And the reason why is because we have the election coming up in November, and those that are elected to take seats will be taking those seats in January for the annual meeting. It is the recommendation of the superintendent that action item board business be approved as presented.
May I entertain a motion, please?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Richard.
Support.
Did I hear Larry first? Who was it first?
You
Amanda?
can give it to Larry.
I'll let Kimberly fight it out. Any discussion? We talked about this last time.
Anybody have any other ideas, or are you okay with where we're at with that?
I just wanted to clarify something for myself. So we were talking about doing every other month, so it makes sense that January is Marshall. Like, it's not just because of new board members coming or not coming, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then February would be Albion. And then also November, we only have one meeting, and December, we only have one meeting.
Right.
Okay.
And at the annual meeting is where we set the calendar for the next coming year. So this is an adjustment to the approved calendar set back in January of last year, or this year. We want to make sure that we know that could change the cadence, but if we set this as practice, I think we're just going to go ahead and keep moving forward with it.
Okay.
But that'll be up to the new board. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, let's start with Amanda.
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Bill, yes. Richard?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to number 7, public comment. Members of the audience may address the board. I've seen nobody else enter, so nobody's here for that. We'll move on to number 8, board member comments for which no action may be taken at this meeting. Anybody have anything they'd like to say?
I'd just like to say again that I appreciate the time and the dedication and thoroughness of everyone who worked this weekend to identify people who may be at risk, just to help prevent the spread in our district, because we know how important that is. And just all the efforts to communicate and to be transparent as best as possible using lots of different mediums, even when some of them may have glitches. Just doing our best to get that information out there to the district, and definitely sending well wishes to those people who are affected right now as they are trying to recover from this illness. On a different note, just wanted to say that Friday night at our football game, what a great time it was to sit in the stands with a bunch of people from the community cheering on our team. And just for a few moments, you kind of forget about everything else that was going on. So it was very much appreciated, and wishing luck to all of our teams that are coming up into the final couple of weeks of their season. We have a lot of athletes out there working very hard, my coaches and families. And then lastly, just don't forget, as we continue, we've been in school now for almost a couple months coming up here, just to continue to support our students and the staff, that knowing that, there's still daily struggles and weekly struggles. And so if you have a moment to support them in any way that you can, even if it's just a kind word or a kind note, just something to kind of help everybody keep plugging along and keep getting through this every week.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.